This is the most miserable one of all. It's all about pest diseases and predators, but don't be too worried about it. It's not all doom and gloom. It's not as bad as it first seems, but we do have to make you aware of these things, because there are some things that we have to report by law, and there are other things that need taking care of. So it's best to know all about them. Right. Sorry, still having a couple of teething problems. All right. Change view. No, it's no good. Let's go back to that. Right, okay. Right, if you're looking for trouble, you have definitely come to the right place. Coughs and sneezes. All animals get illnesses of different kinds from time to time, and humans in particular seem to suffer from more illnesses than most creatures on the planet. Very much true at the moment. There are over 200 viruses associated with the common cold, and they keep changing it. And as I've said previously, we now know a lot more about viruses than we did well over a year ago. And we know that they can mutate and change, and the same is true in bees. But they don't just suffer from viruses, they suffer from a few other things as well. But bee diseases are far, far less frequent than in human beings. This photograph is the only known photograph of a sick bee. No. But only a few are a cause for real concern. Some of them will be a little bit worrying, but the major ones are real trouble, but they're very uncommon. It's very wise to inspect your bees on a regular basis, especially during the season. And we normally look at them on a 7-day rota. So if you work during the week, then you could look at your bees on a Saturday or Sunday. And to inspect a hive normally takes, or it can be done in about 10 minutes, quarter of an hour. But if you're enjoying the view, so to speak, then you can spend up to an hour doing it. In the off season, they may need feeding. I went up and checked mine yesterday in that sunny spell immediately before the thunderstorms, and I put fondant, that's rather like icing sugar, in only one of my hives, because they're all doing very well. They weren't flying. It was nice to see them, and they were bringing in pollen yesterday morning. You need to know what to look for and where to find it. That's very important to be able to identify healthy looking bees and then to identify unhealthy ones. And we've said this a few times, but bees will fly up to 3 miles in any direction. That means they can meet bees that have flown 3 miles from the totally opposite direction, and they meet in the middle, and they meet on the flower, have a chat. And just as with COVID, they can pass the infection from one to the other. So it's easily transmitted 6 miles at a time. So if you live in, I don't know, say Glastonbury, it's quite feasible for you to pick up disease from bees in Walton Street, Wells even, because I think we might just manage the outskirts of Wells, being less than 6 miles from Glastonbury. And this will give you an idea. That's our apiary in Long Sutton, and 3 miles is Langport and includes Somerton, Higham, Long Sutton. And don't forget that there are bees flying from 3 miles towards that outer limit too. So they'll come from Butley and Middle Zoy. They're not without, and Hambridge. They're not outside the range of disease to spread. If you're looking for problems outside the hive, if you see dead bees, then it's an indicator that something's wrong. Except in the winter, you'll see dead bees, a dozen or so outside the hive on a relatively common basis, because bees die during the winter as well as during the summer. And instead of taking the bodies away and dumping them in your next door neighbour's garden, they'll simply push them out the front door, especially if it's cold weather. So not always something to worry about. But if they're large numbers, then there's definitely something to worry about. And that one in the middle of the screen there, that black one, would definitely give me cause for concern. I would want to know why those are dying. If bees are crawling around on the ground, it's a pretty good indicator that something's wrong. If they're crawling towards the hive or away from the hive, you see this occasionally, and it can be a sign of nosema, which we'll talk about later. But it's a pretty good indication that something's wrong. They could just be plain exhausted, but more likely than not, there is a problem. If you see deformed bees, and this one is definitely deformed, its abdomen is stunted and bent under. Its wings are totally shriveled. They're completely useless. And it's, to me, these antennae look a bit suspect as well. That's called deformed wing virus, and we'll cover that later. But looking for things like this is a good idea. And if you see this on the floor of the hive or on the varroa board, which slides in under the mesh floor, then this is a problem, but it's not too serious. These are mummified larvae, and they can either be white, grey, or black, or slaty grey. They look a bit like dead woodlice. And dysentery up the front of the hive. The bees have come out of the hive, and rather than evacuate their bowel in the hive, they come out and do it as they crawl up the front of the hive to fly away. And this is quite often the signal of problems in the hive. Agitated bees. Now these, will they work? No, that's not working. Sorry about that. Previous. Those bees should be running around all over the place. I'll show you it later. But these bees are bees to worry about. This one's very black. They're nipping at each other and doing all sorts of strange things. And if you look on the floor down there, you can see there are quite a few dead bees. There is a video of this later, and I'll show you. Inside the hive, what are we looking for? If you know what healthy brood looks like, and this is very healthy brood, it's a sort of biscuity brown. The cappings are quite flat. That's because there's been goings on inside the cell. The larva is turning into a pupa. It's eating all the food, and as a result of that, and the moisture pressure differentials, the cap has gone flat. But that's absolutely fine. There are one or two missing, but that's okay. It's very uncommon to have absolute wall-to-wall brood. And this is uncapped brood. Here we've got eggs, and we've got larvae in their pool of brood food, and we've got a bit of pollen. I'm sorry, that's an egg. Yeah, we've got a bit of pollen in a couple of cases as well. That's perfectly healthy. So we know what healthy bees look like, or healthy brood. This is what healthy bees look like. They're nice and furry. They've got full wings. The wings aren't damaged. They're pretty pucker-looking bees, those. But if, getting back to the cell cappings, if they're depressed and in little bunches like this, and they've got perforations in them, then that's a cause for concern. It's not normal. So anything that's not normal, you want to look at more closely. And if next to those pinprick punctured cells, you've got black scales like this stuck in the cells, then that is definitely cause for concern. And if the brood is not across the frame and is in patches like this, then that's something else to be concerned about. And what we're looking at, the main diseases that we're looking at: American foul brood, European foul brood, nosema, acrin, deformed wing virus, chalk brood, chilled brood, sac brood, chronic bee paralysis virus, and some other viruses. The reason I rushed through them is I wanted to do this. American foul brood is extremely rare in the country, and I can't remember there having been a case in Somerset during my time beekeeping. There's a little bit of it in Cornwall and in other places in the country, but the likelihood of you ever seeing American foul brood is remote unless you go on a bee disease day and it will be shown to you. European foul brood is less uncommon, and there are some hotspots in Somerset, particularly around South Pepperton, that area. Also, I believe just outside Bridgewater, there are a couple of cases now, and there were a lot of cases over the summer in the north of the county, the sort of Axbridge, Cheddar, Burnham-on-Sea area. Nosema is a microsporidian disease which we used to be able to treat with antibiotics, but we're not allowed to use antibiotics anymore, not on bees. It's been, well, the license expired and it was too costly for the license holders to renew the license, and so it just dwindled away, and there's nothing we can do, particularly chemically, to treat nosema. I'll talk more about each of these in a minute. Acarin is a mite, a tracheal mite, and it's not common, and anything you're treating mites with will kill acarin. And the worst one of all the mites is Varroa, and we'll come on to that again later as well. So if you're treating for Varroa, you will kill any acarin. Deformed wing virus is caused by Varroa. It's a mite, a virus they pass on to the bees. Chalk brood is common in the spring. It's caused by damp in a lot of cases, and then as the hives dry out and warm up during the summer, tends to go away. Chilled brood is avoidable. It's normally exposing the bees too long in cool weather, or not enough bees to cover the frames to keep the brood warm. Sac brood, again, it's on a par with chalk brood, really, seriousness-wise. It's curable after a fashion. There's no chemical treatment, but you can get around it by manipulation. This one is more worrying, chronic bee paralysis virus. It's a new kid on the block. It's only been around for a few years, and bearing in mind the email I sent round about imported bees, this has been largely blamed on the importation of queen bees, and the bees can recover from it, but I've lost 3 hives from it in the last 2 years, so it's one to watch out for, definitely, and I'll be talking more about it in a minute. There are other viruses as well, but there are some diseases and pests that we must inform our bee inspectors about, and those are American foul brood. As I say, very uncommon. It's caused by a bacterium, and only last week there is talk in Finland of a vaccine, an oral vaccine being formulated, which they're trialing in Finland, and who knows, with a bit of luck, in a few months or years' time, we'll have a vaccine, an oral vaccine for American foul brood. But it is dire disease at the moment if your bees get it. European foul brood is caused also by bacteria. It used to be treated with oxytetracycline, but it's much more common now to destroy the colony. It's not very nice, but the bee inspector will come round and in all probability will condemn the colony and put a no movement ban on you. You mustn't move your bees for a given period of time until he's come back and inspected again. But he'll probably dig a pit and light a fire and put the hive and the bees in the fire. Small hive beetle, it's not in the UK yet, but it is in Italy, and all those imported bees, or the vast majority of the imported bees and queens I was talking about, come from Italy. So that's another reason not to import bees. Tropicolaps clari is a parasitic mite similar to the Varroa mite, but not in the UK at the moment, but it is notifiable if you should find it. Asian hornet, this is not the big killer one that they go on about in the newspapers, simply because that's never got to the UK. This one, Vespa nigrithorax, the black thorax Asian hornet or yellow-legged hornet, has been in the UK since 2014, and 2016, and could become an enormous problem. Right, diseases are broken down roughly into two types. One's in the brood, that's the larvae and pupae, and adult bee diseases, which is self-explanatory. It's just the adult bees, the workers, drones and queens that are liable to it. But brood diseases, the prime one, as I just mentioned, is American foul brood. Its attacks becomes evident after the cell is capped. So it's easy to remember that A, American, is A for after 2, and you will only recognize it after the cells are capped. I told you the perforated cappings just now, but you can test for it very simply indeed. The ropiness test is the best way of doing it, and I'll show you that. Destruction of the colony is mandatory with this. This will be a hole dug in the ground and a lot burned, I'm afraid. I've said development of vaccine is on the way, but it is in the early stages. Here's the depressed capping again, just to show you. And the ropiness test, what you do is simply get a matchstick and push it through a capping and then slowly pull it out. And that's about 20 millimeters, an inch. And you can extend this sort of sticky rope for about an inch. And if you can do that, then it's cause for concern. But as I say, American foul brood is extremely rare. And here are those black scales again. They don't come out of the cell like chalk brood, they stay in the cell, they're mummified, and the bees may try and clear them out, but they have a hard job doing so. European foul brood, it attacks before the cells are capped, E for early, E European. So you'll only see this before the cells are capped. And the larvae will lie awkwardly in the cells, stuck to the sides or melted down. They're distorted and all of these things because the bacteria has infected the gut and stopped the larva's ability to digest food. And so it's starving to death, the larva, which is why it's lying awkwardly and distorted. They sometimes treat with oxytetracycline, but most of the times these days, the hive will be destroyed. But there is a compensation fund if you suffer from this. And if you look at these cells with larvae in them, every single one of the ones I can see there, are all infected with European foul brood. The larvae aren't lying in a nice C shape. They're all over the place, and it looks as though they're in pain, which they are. And here again, that's a healthy larva lying flat and in that C shape, but this one's definitely discolored. This one, the gut is mildly discolored, and I would be worried about that. This one's twisted and is standing up on end. This one's twisted, and this one's just shriveled up. So there's definite infection in that hive. Right, get on to less serious stuff. Sac brood is a viral infection by the IFLA virus, and it as a viral infection. At the moment, there's nothing we can do to cure it. We've got nothing at present to cure virus in bees. They turn a creamy color and they upend in the cell, giving a Chinese slipper appearance. Now, I must admit, when somebody first said this to me, I had not much idea what they were talking about, but that is a pair of Chinese slippers. If you imagine that this end, if it were a larvae, would upend and would be sticking out the cell, that's what you'd see. If large areas are infected, it's wise to requeen the colony, but otherwise it's not too much to worry about. It tends to be self-curing. There's a larva upended, upended with its rear end sticking out of the cell. I think this one's been opened up, but they should open this one up as well. Have a look. But that's sac brood. And here we go again. These are dying and going hard. So it's cause for concern, but not too much concern. Chalk brood. It's caused by fungus, as I said just now. It's primarily damp that causes this. I looked in one of my hives yesterday, and inside the lid on the crown board, there was quite a bit of mold and fungus where the damp's got in. And this can be a breeding ground for fungal complaints. Early spring, yeah. Yesterday felt a bit like early spring. We showed you the photograph just now. Turn chalky white and become hard, then they tend to turn black and fall out of the cells or are removed and fall through the open mesh floor. And if it's severe, it's wise to requeen the colony because it tends to be not failing queens, but queens are a little bit suspect who are prone to having colonies with this in it. Breed from hygienic bees. That it won't mean anything to you at all at the moment, but basically what you do is you find colonies that don't suffer from chalk brood, and you use the queen or eggs, a frame of eggs, to create new queens, and then you use those queens to populate your problem hives and get rid of the old queen. And here's chalk brood in the early stages. It's going chalky white and upended, and they will mummify and go black. And that's the picture I showed you earlier. Lots of mummified larvae on the floor. Chilled brood, I said earlier that it's avoidable. The brood dies as a result of getting too cold. Now, this can either be your fault for leaving the hive open too long in cool weather, or it could be that there aren't enough bees in the hive to cover the brood and keep it warm. So it is avoidable. If a colony is that weak, it might be an idea to unite it with another colony. Right, adult bee diseases, and we're getting on to the worst problem that we've got, really. It's partially curable, but it is the biggest problem there is. Varroasis or varrosis is a condition caused by the varroa mite, Varroa destructor. They reproduce inside the cells, and right back in session 2, Joe showed you a developing egg and larva, which I'll show you again in a minute, and you can see Varroa rushing about inside the cell. It came into the UK in 1990 because we exported European honeybees to the Far East because they're the easiest bees to keep, European honeybees, and the local bee, Apis cerana, lives with the mite. It can deal with it, but our honeybees, Apis mellifera, can't. And the mite jumped species and found a very unwilling host, but one that couldn't deal with it in our honeybees. And basically, it hopped across from Asia, colony to colony, and arrived in the UK in 1990. And ever since then, it's caused horrendous problems. At first, we had no idea what to do about it, but now we can treat it. In fact, it's the only thing that we as beekeepers can treat. Up until about 2-3 years ago, it was thought, and is possibly still the case, that they suck the hemolymph, which is the bee's blood. But this chap, Sam Ramsey, thought, well, there's not much protein and goodness in the blood of the bee. There's quite a bit of waste product floating around in there, and it's primarily for servicing the cells. It's what we call the fat body, which is where all the rich food is. And his PhD thesis revolved around this, and he's pretty much convinced the world these days that the bees, the varroa mites, actually live and are on the fat body, which is groups of fat cells inside the body cavity. And that's now taken to be gospel with regard to what varroa live on. Things are changing all the time in beekeeping. That's one new fact which I don't think we put in last year's sessions, and there are a couple more. That possible vaccine for American foul brood is one. But varroa destructor is responsible for all sorts of problems, and I showed you the deformed wing virus just now, but it's got a bundle of components that it's responsible for. I shouldn't worry too much about most of those. Deformed wing virus, yes, and acute bee paralysis virus is a problem. Not chronic bee paralysis virus that I was talking about just now, but acute, and they are different and different causing. But the main one is deformed wing virus. If a bee has deformed wings, it can't fly. If it can't fly, it's useless to all the other bees. And there is a varroa mite on a pupa, right on the front of its face, near the antennae and the eyes. And it, the female, and this is a female, will go into the cell just before it's sealed. And she will, then once it's sealed, she will lay one egg, and that will hatch into a male varroa mite. And then she will lay female eggs. They will hatch, and this is where it gets a bit rude. The male will mate with his sisters. And then when the cell opens and the adult bee comes out, here are two adult female varroa mites on a bee. All the offspring come out. The male dies in the cell, but all the females come out and then latch on to bees in the hive and then repeat the cycle by going into a cell that's about to be sealed. And after treating for varroa mites, this is what you can get. All these little brown specks are varroa mites, and there are hundreds of them in that. That's a 4-inch square that you can see there. And there's loads and loads and loads of them. There are bits of wax and pollen as well from removed cappings, and bits of sugar crystal here. But these dark spots are varroa mites, a lot of them. This is the video. Oh, my videos aren't working this evening. All right. No, sorry about that. That was the slide I was going to show you with the male varroa mite in it, but I'm sorry about that. Treatment for varroa, chemical acaricides or miticides, and there are 23 permitted treatments at the moment. And these are just a couple, and these are all thymol based. These are pyrethroids, but they build up pyrethroid resistance after a couple of treatments. Max Mighty Quick Strips are formic acid, and you can use this in the summer, and it's the only treatment you can use when there is honey in the hive. Oxalic acid we use in the winter, and these two acids basically paralyze the mites. Oxalic acid, it paralyzes the legs and the mites drop off the bees. There are 3 now, not 2, 3 permitted oxalic acid treatments. And you can use icing sugar, but it's not 100% effective. Integrated pest management. This is basically mix and match with a lot of different treatments, whether it be using miticides, the abibioxol, oxyvar, icing sugar, the open mesh floor, so that the mites dropping off the bees will drop through. You can do another thing called drone culling, which is, I think we've got a slide of it coming up. Yeah, sorry, I mentioned this. The bees can build up a resistance to pyrethroids, so it's good to ring the changes, not keep to the same treatment all the time. we showed you an open mesh floor in session 3. It's got a slide in the bottom, and this is where we see how many varroa mites have fallen. They go through the mesh floor, land on the slide, and that photograph I showed you of all the dead varroa mites is the result. So you can monitor the mite fall, as we call it. And just to show you what size they are, here's 2 female varroa mites against a 5-pence piece. They're tiny. Yeah, about the size of a pinhead. Okay, but there's the female on a bee, and that's the male. Completely different, but you won't see one of these very often at all. But unfortunately, you will see an awful lot of females because they're present in the vast majority of hives. I'm not going to labour this. The best place to pick this list of permitted treatments up is on the Veterinary Medicines Directorate website. But when you get bees, you register them with bee base, then you from that site, and it's worth having a look at, you can, going through the diseases menu, you can go to the Veterinary Medicines Directorate website and find permitted treatments for bees. And we've got all those treatments which are perfectly fine. They work, 95% efficacy, and yet people still want to use their own home remedies, which in my mind is a bit silly. A lot of us know that rhubarb contains oxalic acid, and people have been known to put rhubarb leaves in the tops of their hives to try and kill varroa mites. It will to a degree, but the main problem is it's an unknown quantity. You don't know the concentration of the oxalic acid, and therefore you can't effectively treat them. And under treatment is worse than no treatment at all. Here's one of the treatments going in. It's on a clear plastic strip with fold back lugs, which you hook over the tops of the frames and just drop in for a period of about 6 weeks. This is HappyGuard, which is thymol based. It's in a paste, and you put it on the top bars of the hives, and it's so repulsive to the bees that they basically pick it up and take it down through the frames, treating all the bees as they go, and spit it out the front door. An oxalic acid treatment, which we do in the winter, is trickled between the frames, 5 ml between each frame. Some people like to vaporize oxalic acid, but that's all a bit dangerous to me. The fumes are vile, so I wouldn't do that myself. And I was on about drone culling. If you put a super frame, which is the small frame, inside the brood box, because there's a difference of about 3 inches in the depth of that and a brood frame, the bees will make comb on the bottom of the frame, and they will draw drone cells. Those are bigger than the worker cells here. And if you're wondering what the W is about, I'll come back to that in a minute. The lack of bees in a W there. But if you put this smaller frame into a brood box, the bees will build that drone cell, that drone comb. The queen will lay drone eggs in there. Drone cells are far more attractive to varroa than worker cells, and those are guaranteed to have quite a few varroa in. So if you remove the drone brood from the bottom of this frame, you can remove quite a lot of varroa mites at the same time. And what's the W about? That's where the reinforcement wires are in the frame. And the bees don't always like, the queen doesn't always like laying eggs over the wires. That's all it is, just personal taste by the queen. And this is drone culling. You get this multi-pronged fork called a decapping fork, and you just slide it in just under the cappings of the comb and lift it out, and you'll end up with, unfortunately, some dead drone pupae. But here you can see you're removing varroa mites at the same time. So it's quite effective. But if you if you do several of these things, you treat, you do drone culling, you have mesh floors, you could use icing sugar as well. That's called integrated pest management. Right, paralysis and other viruses. Most of them are exacerbated by Varroa infestation, except for chronic bee paralysis virus, but we have no treatment at the moment. It's totally untreatable. The thing to do is keep the Varroa levels low, and you can do this by treating. I do it twice a year, in the summer with, after the honey harvest with Max, and then I use oxalic acid in the winter on a nice, bright, sunny, cold day when there's no brood in the hive, hopefully, because oxalic acid will not penetrate the brood cells. But if there's no brood, all the Varroa are out and about riding on bees, and you can kill very high percentage. If it gets too bad, you can do a complete cone change, and you literally put the bees to one side, put a new box on the original site, and put all new frames in, and then shake the bees back into the hive on the original position, and that's called a Bailey comb change, and it really reduces the mite levels considerably. Chronic bee paralysis virus, it's not certain, but it's thought to be imported queens. Excuse me. Anything strong enough to kill a virus will kill the bees at present, but we're in hope that vaccines are on the way. Nosema, Apis anserana, there are two different forms of similar disease. It's a microsporidium, which is very akin to a fungus, and it's a gut infection, or it attacks the gut of the adult bee. And the main problem with this is that their ability to forage becomes less because the gut is damaged and they're unable to digest pollen. And if they can't do it, they won't bother to go and collect it. And so it can kill colonies quite easily, especially in the winter. The dysentery that we saw up the front of the hive earlier on, that green hive, pale green hive, could have been as a result of nosema. It's not 100%, but dysentery is a pretty good indicator that you've got nosema. You can diagnose it with a microscope. You won't see it with the naked eye, but the bees will get smaller and smaller, and not the individual bees, but the successive generations, and you can lose a colony through it. We used to be able to treat it with a drug called Fumidil B, but we're not allowed to anymore. And you can't get Fumidil B anyway. So we've got no known medicine, and to be honest, when I started beekeeping, it was seen as a major problem. But considering I've not been able to treat my bees for 8 years for nosema, it's quite surprising that I think I've lost one colony to nosema, which was a swarm that arrived in my garden, an enormous swarm, gave me 3 whole supers, like 90 pounds of honey, and then died over winter, even though it was a very strong colony. And it's quite common for stronger colonies to suffer most from diseases. These aren't said to be effective, but I wouldn't put too much faith in them. Vitafeed Gold and Epigard. Change all the cones again is a pretty good idea. Acarin is a tracheal mite. The tracheas are the breathing tubes all the way down the sides of the thorax and the abdomen, and it infects the tracheal tubes and basically chokes the poor little darlings. But if you're treating for Varroa, then in all probability the treatment will cure any acarin in your hive as well. Not in the UK at the present. The small hive beetle, about the size of a ladybird, but a lot quicker, running around. They lay their eggs on the floor of the hive and in crevices, and then the larvae tend to drop through the floor of the hive and pupate in the ground around the hive. But they're quite similar to another larvae, except that they're quite spiny. But they've not been seen in the UK. That's the important thing to remember. But we're just warning you that they're out there. They are very, very destructive, and they spoil any honey you've got in the hive. You have to throw it all away. They eat everything and anything, basically, apart from the woodwork. And our bees, Apis mellifera, have no resistance to them. They can't fight them. Trobolelaps clari is a parasitic mite again, as I said earlier, about the size of a ladybird. It's sorry, about the size of a varroa mite, but it's not in the UK at present. I'm just making you aware of it. Same with varroa; it could kill a colony. They are in Italy and in many other countries in the world as the small hive beetle, but not in the UK. Again, any miticide that you're treating varroa mites with would kill it. Right, hygiene's a big thing. Don't leave things hanging around. If you scraped a bit of honeycomb out of your hive when you're inspecting, don't just drop it on the floor. Keep a bucket with a lid and put it in that. Don't throw things on the compost heap either, because basically the bees will visit the compost heap. Never leave frames to be cleaned up by the bees. And keep transferring frames between the hives to a minimum. Drifting, we were talking about that in session 3. Bees can get blown from one hive into another. So do what you can to avoid that, because that can transfer disease. Change your frames regularly. It's normally reckoned about every 3 years. Bailey comb change is complete and utter. It's a one go, one hit comb change. But if you slowly move your oldest frames towards the outsides of the brood box, you can then, when they reach the outside, take them out and put a brand new frame in, and the bees will start drawing new comb. But do it relatively regularly. Relatively regularly. You don't have to do it every year. Some people do, but it's not necessary unless you've got a problem. Never place brood or super boxes on the ground. The beauty of the flat roof is that you can take it off, turn it upside down, and you can stack any boxes you need to on there. Keep tools, gloves, and suits clean. A bucket of soda solution. I keep one in the apiary all the time. I keep my hive tools in it. And you can wash your gloves between each hive. Always best if they're latex rather than leather. Leather gloves spread disease anyway, so I would advise against leather gloves. If you're a bit worried at the beginning of your beekeeping, you can get some quite thick latex gloves these days, which are sting-proof. Pests and predators, wasps and hornets. Wasps are a problem. European hornets, not so much. But they can decimate a colony by stealing the honey. Wasps in particular are after the larvae to take the thorax home to feed their larvae, because in return they get a sticky, sweet reward. Reduce your entrance size towards the end of the summer. Put out wasp traps. And if you've got strong colonies, they should be able to battle against wasps. It's mainly small colonies that suffer. But wasps will find any small crack and get into a hive. So make sure you've got none of those. And if you need to seal a small crack quickly, there's always grass around a beehive, and you can poke a bit of grass in the hole as a temporary measure. And there, I think I've shown you this before. This is a wasp killing a bee. It's decapitated it. It's after the thorax. It's taken 2 legs off already. And it will take the thorax away and take it back to the hive. Sorry about this one. It is a bit grim, but it just shows you the lengths that wasps will go to in order to get protein and moisture. That is a racing pigeon being, or it was dead, but it's being devoured by wasps. Sorry about that, but just to show you how nasty they are. The Asian hornet, Vespa velutina nigrithorax, it's an Asian hornet of which there are about 9 or 10 different species, and it arrived in France in 2014. There we go. It's got a black thorax, hence its name nigrithorax, and apart from that, it's pretty much black, apart from the tips of the legs and this yellow band around the rear of the abdomen. It's got these little wispy bands, but it appears black when you see it with a yellow backside. And sorry, 2004. I was 10 years old. It arrived near Bordeaux in a shipment of garden crockery pots, a single queen. And from that single queen, in the first year, it spread to the whole of this red region. So it's pretty dynamic, the speed at which it spreads. By 2010, it had covered the whole of the west of France, with the exception of the Finistère Peninsula here and the Cherbourg Peninsula. But there were little pockets up here, and this is probable infestations in northern Spain. It's across the Pyrenees, southwest France, around the Perpignan region, and over here in the Marseille region. 2012, the green area, test your French here, absolutely certain presence in the green area, probable presence in the brown area, and these other classifications don't apply because there aren't any. But it's possible up here in Belgium too by that stage. 2013, sorry, these are from different sources, so the colour charts are different, but or the colour references are different. But it's now spread completely. The black dots are now nests, and there are nests here, and one on the Belgian border up here as well. So it's spreading quite well. 2015, it spread just that little bit more, but it's in the Galicia area of northern Spain and down into Portugal now, as well as around Santander and Bilbao here. And 2016, 20th of September, it was found in Tetbury in Gloucestershire, a nest quite close to Prince Charles's estate. So it had crossed the channel. Now, in all probability, it went across in a caravan or camping equipment or something like that, being brought back by holidaymakers. But it's not known how it got there, but a nest was found. And here are, I've got a video working, that's good. These are Asian hornets hawking outside a beehive. And there are 1, 2, and the third one just disappeared. And they literally sit outside the hive waiting for the bees to come back. And here's one. There's a bee about to come in from the right, and you'll see what they do. There you go, caught it. They wait until they're fatigued, they're coming back from foraging, they're exhausted, they're weighed down with food, and they're easy prey. 2017, a dead one was found just outside Bristol, another one in Bath, one in Tame in Oxfordshire, and the Tetbury nest was still going, I think, by that time. Then in North Devon, a couple of nests, one in Lincolnshire, found in a cauliflower, one in Cornwall in 2018, the second one in Cornwall. You can see it was becoming quite serious. 2 in the New Forest, and 1 way up in Yorkshire. So they'd spread all over the country. The likelihood of them spreading from Tetbury to Yorkshire is improbable. So these are probably fresh infestations. And this is why we have to be so careful. Same with Cornwall. So we just have to keep an eye out. And it's coming up to the time when the queens, which have hibernated all over winter, will be coming out to make new nests. So it's worth, especially in March, keeping a watchful eye for these queens of the Asian hornet. I was one in Kent as well, sorry, I forgot that one. This is a European hornet. These are big lumbering giants. The smallest are quite small, but still bigger than bees. But they're quite big at 35 millimeters long, the big ones. And they're primarily chestnut and yellow. Markings on the back of the abdomen are very similar to wasps. There's black and yellow down here. But you can see that the thorax is chestnut, as are the legs and the antennae. Nothing to worry about. They keep going into my wasp traps, and my wife every day goes up, puts a stick in, and the hornets climb onto the stick, and they come and she just pulls them out. They're really docile, and she just releases them, and they dry out and then fly off after a while. That's the Asian hornet. It's smaller. It's not humongous and dangerous looking in that respect, but you can see it's primarily black. The head is chestnut and orange. This is more yellowy, the European hornet, but primarily black with dark wings. If you see one, try and take a photograph. It's not always easy because they tend not to stand still and smile. But you must report it to the local bee inspector or the non-native species secretariat. But you can find, if you just Google report an Asian hornet, you'll find the place to go, or give Joe and I a ring. And but if you can take a photograph, that'd be ideal. Joe's now going, oh, why did he say that? Mice and rats, mice in particular can be a problem in winter. They will want to find somewhere warm to spend the winter and will go into the hive. They'll destroy the wax. They'll just live off the honey and the wax all winter. You can fit mouse guards to the front of the hive, and these are strips of metal with small holes in that you just pin over the entrance. The bees can get in and out, but mice can't. If you keep the place clean and clear of debris, that will reduce the risk of rats in particular. And this is what mice do to a hive. They just chew the comb away completely. It's all missing there. And here's one who suffered the consequences. The bees euthanized it. This is a mouse guard, just pinned on with drawing pins. The bees can still use the entrance here, but mice can't get in and out. Wax moths. Now these are becoming an increasing problem. In strong hives, they're less of a problem than weak hives. But in the winter, store your boxes with comb in a cold place and hope for a very cold spell like the one we've just had, because it will kill the eggs and the larvae. But keep a lookout for moths. Any moth you see in a hive, in my opinion, is a wax moth. It's not entirely true, but it's better to be safe than sorry. And you'll see telltale webbing, like thick, dense cobwebs in the hive. That's a good sign that you've got them. Can be treated with Sertan. Paradichlorobenzene is now illegal. You can't use that. You can use acetic acid, as we used to call it. It's now known as ethanoic acid. But it not only kills the moths, it will corrode all and any metalwork it can find. So it should be used with sparingly. That's a wax moth larva. And there's a bee to give you an idea of its size. They're about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch long. And they just wriggle around, eating anything they want to. And here's the webbing I was on about. There's the moth. If it's in a hive, it's a wax moth. And this, Joe showed you this picture. These are pupating wax moth in between every single frame. And this hive died out, and then the wax moths took over. Green woodpeckers. That amazed me when I found that figure. That's how many there are in the UK. Only 15,000 pairs. That's not very many at all. But if the ground's frozen, they can't reach their staple diet, which is ants and ant larvae. And so they go anywhere they can find a source of protein and carbohydrate. And that's a beehive in their opinion, and they will just bore a hole straight through the side of the hive and put their tongue in and eat what they can. But the resulting hole will make it very cold inside the hive, and the bees could perish as a result of the cold. If you put wire mesh around the hive, 1-inch chicken wire, then as long as it's a little bit away from the hive, the woodpeckers don't stand a chance, but the bees can still fly in and out. That's the fellow we're talking about, Picus viridis, and that is not a worm, that is its tongue. That's how it can get inside the hive. It just pecks a hole, then flickers in with its tongue and picks up anything and everything. And that's the sort of damage they do to a beehive. If this had had wire mesh around it, it would have been fine. But they stand on these ledges, which gives them a perfectly good perch, and just bang away till they get through the box. And that is wire mesh around the hive, and that is a mouse guard. And the bees can get in and out. They're not troubled by it at all. They'll go in and out of there without any problems. Other pests, badgers. They can knock hives over. Make sure the hive is stable. Strap it if necessary to the hive stand. But I have seen straps going under a paving slab that the hive stood on, and then you can ratchet strap the hive down to the paving slab. And that way the badgers won't knock it over, and the wind won't knock it over in the winter either. If you've got livestock around the area that you're wanting to keep bees, then fence it off. Stock fencing is relatively cheap, as are 3-inch fence posts and half-round rails. It's quite inexpensive to fence it off. Vandals and thieves. Hives do get stolen, vandalized. A hive full of bees is very easy to steal and commands a very good price, about £250 to £500 worth of stuff, including the bees in a hive. Basically hide them, out of sight, out of mind. They can't see them or don't know where they are. They can't steal them. But definitely register your bees with bee base. And you can Google just that single word, bee base, and you'll find it, okay? Another pest is bees. Strong hives will rob weak hives, and they can kill a weak hive off. So don't be thinking these things are totally harmless insects. They're out to survive. Starvation. This time of year, they've got through the worst of the winter, but even though things are warming up, there's no food out in the countryside for them. Particularly, there's a bit of pollen at the moment, but nothing worth speaking about in the way of nectar. And if there are not enough stores in the hive, these bums sticking out of the cells are a very good indicator that these bees have starved. And lastly, but not least, damp. Damp will kill bees, as will flooding. But damp in the hive, so make sure your hive is waterproof. Damp does more damage than cold. Excuse me. Neonicotinoid insecticides were banned in 2013. These are normally seed dressing sprays used on oilseed rape in particular, but the government has just done what's known as a derogation. They've given emergency permission for neonicotinoids to be used on sugar beet in East Anglia. The problem with neonicotinoids, or neonicotinoids as some people call them, is that although they're put on the seeds as dressing, they're systemic and they will go through the plant, and any insect feeding on that plant will be killed or compromised. Not only do they do that, but the dressings wash off in the soil and contaminate the soil in the immediate vicinity. They also go into the waterways and pollute the waterways. And there is a petition at the moment to stop the derogation of neonicotinoid insecticides. If you want to read some good books on the subject, there's a chap called Dave Goulson, Goulson, who's written several times on the subject. But if you look up Dave Goulson on the web, you'll find his books. Yeah, it does cause horrendous problems to all pollinating insects, not just bees. And it adulterates honey as well. At the Apomondia in 2019, that's the World Bee Festival, it was in Montreal. The people from around the world exhibiting honeys were obviously, excuse me again, exhibiting their best honeys to be judged. And of all the honeys being exhibited, 47% were found to be adulterated, not just by neonicotinoids, but adulterated with all sorts of things. So it's common that honeys become adulterated. It's also unfortunately common that companies adulterate their honey themselves. This is the other aspect of insecticides. They have what's known as a half-life. That is the period for which they're at least 50% effective. And with DDT, which was banned back in 1980, they're still finding DDT in the soil today. Neonicotinoids, their half-life is believed to be anything up to a year, and an awful lot of damage can be done in a year. And I was referring to Cruiser SB in that statement, and there we are, it's 367 days half-life. If you suspect pesticide poisoning, you should inform the county spray liaison officer, and his name can be found on the Somerset Beekeepers website. His name is actually Chris Harris, and he's a commercial beekeeper down in Taunton. But you could inform the bee inspector as well. If you think they've been poisoned by crop spraying, take a photograph of your dead bees. They'll be in the hive, outside the hive, on the ground, whatever. And you've still got that phone in your pocket, so you can do that. You can take a photograph and then inform the spray liaison officer with as much detail as you can, but take a sample of at least 30 bees, or as many as you can. Keep some for yourself in your freezer, in a box or matchbox or something like that. But you need to then send them to the National Bee Unit at Sand Hutton in Yorkshire for analysis. Your records, we were talking about those the week before last, they must be in writing, or rather Joe was talking about them, sorry, permanent and made available on request to a duly authorised person or anybody having a duty of enforcement. You can keep it on your computer, it doesn't have to be on paper, but you need to give who you bought it from, the batch number, the best before date, when it was administered, and all that kind of information so that it's totally traceable. You must say what it is, batch number, date of purchase, date of use, how much used, and on which colonies. Okay, right. This is quite important. Bee Base, which is run by FERA, and the bee inspectors work for AFA, which is an offshoot of FERA. It's all tied up with DEFRA, the Department of the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. But register your bees on Bee Base, and you will then be informed of any serious problems within a 5-kilometre radius of your bees. That's quite important. It will also give you access to the bee inspectors, and it is a portal into solving problems with your bees. National Bee Unit is where you can find Bee Base. You can either go through that route or Google Bee Base. And there's a lot of information on there, useful information. Register your bees, and if it's a new colony, ask for a beekeeper to come round and inspect it, a bee inspector to come round and inspect it, and they will. If you say, you know, it's my first colony of bees and I want to be sure they're healthy, they will come and inspect for free. And you will get those alerts. It's just to clear up who's who, because they keep changing the names. I like that one, non-native species secretariat. It sounds like a very important government body. It's actually through people. BBKA, British Beekeepers website, it's got a lot of useful information on it. We explained this right back at the beginning. It's a charity association divided into counties and then local associations. The division of an association running this course is Somerton Beekeepers. They're part of Somerset Beekeepers Association, and then Somerset is a member of the British Beekeepers Association. Right, we looked at troubleshooting, notifiable diseases and pests, other brood diseases, adult bee diseases, pests and predators, veterinary medicines guidance, other sources of information, and next week is all going to be a whole lot more cheerful. Joe will be talking about honey, beeswax, and what you can make with beeswax, polish or candles, and oh, that should have been something quite cheery. Sorry, I'll go back to that. Sorry. That was worth having. There you go. Okay, I'll unshare my screen. And have we got any questions? Yes, we have.
Yeah, you've got the whole load in the chat. Yeah, lots in the chat.
Just having a look. Joe's fallen asleep there. Nice. All right. I've just bought 2 hives which had a wax moth infestation this autumn. I'm going to blow torch inside and replace the frames. They're also outside in the cold. Do you recommend? Oh, lost that. Right. Do you recommend I do anything else to make sure they are clean? No, if you torch the hive out and don't reuse the frames, you should be fine. Okay, that's Melissa. Where have we got now? We have a pair in our garden. Don't know what they are. Oh, woodpeckers, I'm guessing. Right.
Woodpeckers.
Yeah, yeah. Do you need to use treatments in a preventative manner against the mites? Yeah, some people say no. I treat mine with Max, which is formic acid treatment, as soon as I've taken the honey off, as a preventative, and then again in the winter with oxalic acid as a preventative. That's a menacing name, Elsie. I don't know whose name. Doesn't say.
Destructor.
Oh, right. Yes. Okay. Not sure having my dinner whilst listening to this session was the best idea. Sorry, that's Sandra Calvert. I had mine earlier. Sorry. I did warn you. I should have said, put any sharp blades away from where you're sitting, but I didn't. So looking forward to getting my bee suit. I'm aiming for as gaudy as possible and garish as possible. Right. Okay. They'll do that for you. Very excited as I am 5 foot and a fuller figure. I ordered my bee suit today. Oh, right. We could have got you a discount, Terry, if you'd waited. Rosalind didn't receive the notes. We'll sort that on. Even if I duplicate them, I'll send them to everybody again. Okay. May not be to the morning, but you'll all get them. Sorry about that. Back to Australia. I didn't see any notes this week, but I will be scrubbing away while I'm listening. Okay. The notes are pretty comprehensive. They don't have that chart of permissible medicines, but otherwise they're okay. Yeah, okay. Yep, I sent them to Duncan. Oh, somebody else didn't get the email. I'm sorry, that's my computer. Somebody showing off saying they did have the link. No, there weren't any notes for some people. Somebody came as themselves this evening. That's good. Right. That's it. Is there any other questions? One thing I will say is
there's some new messages down the bottom.
Okay.
There's 2 new ones about destroying a whole colony and about the Tom Seeley lecture.
Right. How do you go about destroying a whole colony? And Joe was worried about destroying queen cells last week. The quickest way.
Petrol.
Sorry, Eric.
Petrol.
Yeah.
Petrol.
I was building up to it slowly. Right. It's a last resort destroying a colony, but if you really have to, the easiest way to do it is wait till the evening when they've all gone to bed, block the entrance, have a cup full of petrol, and take the roof off and pour the petrol in through the feed hole in the crown board, and they will be not of this world within a very short time indeed. The fumes will kill them, but it is a last resort.
It does need a solid floor.
Yeah, a mesh floor will just let the fumes escape. Gosh, they're pouring in thick and fast now. Would I be able to use a rigid form of insulation around the hive in winter? I don't do it. Some people do. It helps them to weather the cold, but cold's not one of the biggest problems, and you can cause condensation if you're not careful. And condensation is a bigger problem than the cold. Yeah, sorry, that's and within that same person's question. Will someone be around to look after our hives if we're on holiday or taken ill? I'm sure as a last resort, somebody will always come and have a look on a regular basis for you, Billy. If you know somebody nearby, I think you're over in Westbury, Submendip, aren't you, over that way? There are people in the Cheddar area who will pop in, I'm sure. There are a couple of very nice, friendly beekeepers in Cheddar. Any evidence of bees self-medicating in the same way as some animals do? Actually, the talk on Saturday by Tom Seeley was about precisely that, especially with regard to the bromite, what they call hygienic bees. It's on its way, hygienic bees, but it's going to take some while to breed hygienic strains. With regard to other diseases, not really. They get over it or they don't, put very simply. Chronic bee paralysis virus is one they can recover from. American foul brood, no. European foul brood, there is a school of thought to say that it's present at all times, and some just become more prone to suffering from it. So not really, apart from Varroa, where they can remove some of them. Tom Seeley, yeah, he actually, it was an experiment. Sorry, this is Nicky Bolton. He used an awful lot of colonies, Tom Seeley, to try and get to Varroa resistant bees, and he lost about 80% in the first year, if I remember rightly. But he's getting to the point where he is breeding resistant strains. So it's a very relevant question. Right, how do you go about destroying a whole colony? We've done that. Spot 2 hives around Maxwell. I think we're there, aren't we? Unless I go right down the bottom again. All right, Norbert's call. Yeah, I think that's it. Unless there are any more verbal questions, you feel free to turn your mics on and have a chat. They've all gone.
Hiya, I've got a question. Hiya.
Hi, Emma.
Hi. Yeah, I was just wondering, in terms of like integrated pest management, is there anything you can actively do alongside the bees to encourage better health or anything like that?
You can spend, it's like buying food supplements for humans. You can spend as much as you want on Wonder Miracle feeds. There are some.
I was meaning more of a natural kind of nature, like anything you should plant nearby, or I don't know really. Is there?
Not to promote health. It's always nice to plant some stuff that the bees will forage on, but they will forage over 3 miles. So really, if you're planting stuff in your own garden, you're probably planting it for your neighbour's bees more than yours. Have you got anything to say, Joe and Eric? No?
Okay, yes, if I could just say, Emma, obviously with integrated pest management, what you're always trying to do is accepting that you're not going to eliminate the varroa mite in your colony, but what you're endlessly trying to do is knock back the number of mites, endlessly knocking the populations back. So the mites are breeding and multiplying, and so the number is getting bigger, and you're doing a series of things which knocks them back, and you try and keep them to a subclinical level, to a level that they are not really having a major significant effect on the colony. And obviously, I mean, one of the things we saw there was you can do some drone culling, because they tend to like to breed in the drone cells, because the period of 23 days in the whole period for the life cycle of the drone before it becomes an adult gives it a longer period to actually breed and produce more mites than in a worker cell. So if you do some drone culling, certainly what I also do is then after the honey's been taken off in August, I actually treat with one of the things you saw there. I use Apiguard, which is a thymol thing. And again, that really knocks it back. And that's a big help at that time, because the larvae which are reared in August are going to be the winter bees. They're physiologically different to the summer bees. They're going to survive 6 months in the hive. They are physiologically different to the summer bees, which fly themselves to death and probably will live 6 weeks. And then again, just in January, treat them with the oxalic acid, and it just, you spray it, or rather you trickle 5 ml between the combs on the bees. And again, it knocks them back again. So integrated pest management is actually all about, you know, endlessly just knocking it back. You've got to accept that you're probably never going to eliminate them a bit, you know, completely.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And also, where would you source these sorts of medications? Do you have a where do you go? Is it online?
Usually,
or?
well, Stu, do you want to answer?
Yeah, sure. What we do, Emma, with 2 treatments, Max, which is the formic acid strips that you put in the hive, and oxalic acid treatment in the winter, we bulk buy as an association. And I mean, we bought enough to treat 200 hives last year of Max, and about the same of oxalic acid, if I remember rightly. Because we get, I mean, a healthy discount. If you phone a supplier up and say, "Can I have enough to treat 200 hives?" It's like the Haynes Bee Manual. They treat you like some kind of living gold, because you're going to spend an awful lot of money with them. And we get substantial discounts, which we pass on to the members. I think we made about threepence a treatment last year. We hived off for the association, and it works out at about, for the oxalic acid, it's about 75 pence a hive to treat them. That's in the winter. The Max is, I can't remember exactly per hive, but it's certainly cheaper than just going out and buying it individually. If you can't buy less than treatment for 2 hives of Max, and it works out at about £8 a hive if you do it that way, with the postage and packing, but which is ridiculous amount of money just for treating 1 hive of bees. We get it for, as I say, substantially less than that. And we buy in buckets of 10 treatments per bucket. And we bought, as I say, 20 buckets of this stuff last year. And it comes in two pads about so big, which you just lay on the top bars of the brood box and you just leave it in there for 7 days. It's the only treatment that is that quick in the summer. Everything else is at least 4 weeks, but this you put in 7 days, and then after 7 days, take it out, job done. So yes, you can order it through. Where do you live roughly, Emma? Don't tell me your home address.
Near South Petherton. Near South Petherton.
So you'll be in Somerton Division. We will. I mean, you're now, apart from the hiccup with the emails this week, you're now on the emailing list. You should have had the newsletter and that sort of thing. And in the newsletter, at the appropriate times, we'll say we're bulk buying honey jars or medicines. If you're interested, let me know. And the name goes on the list. Yeah. And then we have a distribution.
Oh, yeah, that's great. Okay.
Yeah. And then you
cool. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, just drive up to the apiary and pick it up.
Stu, is it worth saying, while we've still got a lot of people here, in case people weren't here last week, to say about the bee suit order again?
Yes.
In case anyone missed it last week.
Yeah, sure. That's the other thing. One person said that they'd been out and ordered a bee suit today. We put in a bulk order, hopefully every year, with a company called BBware down in Cornwall. They're one of the 2 best companies in the country for producing bee suits. The 2 companies are related in as much as it's the same family, but there was a business disagreement and they parted, and both companies are based in Truro in Cornwall. But one is far more expensive than the other, but the quality is the same. And we go to the cheaper one of the 2, and we get a minimum of 15% discount on the full retail price of suits. So if you want to have a look at the BBware website, you'll find they're $122.99 for a standard bee suit. And if you take 15% off that, you're talking about 109, 110 quid. So it's quite a saving. Buying cheap bee suits, I would advise against it. I think you would as well, Joe and Eric. If you buy a cheap bee suit for about 40 or 50 quid, you will live to regret it. They don't last very long at all. I've had a BBware suit for 12 years and a BBware jacket for a year longer than that, 13 years. They're worth it. I mean, they're actually cheaper in the long run than buying cheaper ones.
If you buy a cheap suit this year, you'll buy it again next year.
Yeah, I bought one year. And
Stu, someone is asking when you want to start taking orders, and how do people go about getting letting you know?
Yeah, okay. Well, everybody who's on the course is getting the newsletter, and I will put it in the newsletter probably at the end of this month. Okay, there'll be a newsletter out at the end of February, and I'll put it in there with details of what to do, and we'll get numbers. We will ask for names, and if you could go to the BBware site, but this will all be in the newsletter. Work out what your size is, what colour you want, and the style you want. Let me know. She got it from BBware. She got a discount as well. Yeah.
It's me, Terry. I'm 5 foot, and I'm rather beautifully round. And by the time I spoke to the chap at Jamie at BBware, and we worked out the discount. By the time I worked out that I'd need to go to Somerton to collect it from you, and the time involved in driving from Cheddar to Somerton, and the petrol and everything, I just decided that it was as long as it was short, really. So and because it was a special cut, they would need to put it would delay your order by another 2 or 3 weeks because of making it. So
yeah, as long as you're happy.
Yeah, no, I'm happy. Yeah, no, it was really, really good. So I filled out the special cut order form and then spoke to him on the phone, And
He's a nice lad, isn't he?
yeah, they were absolutely brilliant. Really good service. I felt really.
Yeah.
Someone's asking about the 4 different veil options that BBware have.
Okay.
Which is better?
Only aware of 2. There's the fencing style, which is a flat front with a sort of hoop. That's what we call a fencing veil. And then there's the hat with mesh all the way around that way and rings in it, which is, I don't think there's any one better than the other. The one with the hat and the rings, there's less chance of it blowing back against your face. But I think if there could be a fashion in these suits, the fashion is towards the fencing style, the flat face one. But it's personal preference, I would say. I was going to try and get
the fencing veil with a baseball cap keeps the veil from blowing back against your face.
It's not every day you need that, but if there is a bit of a breeze, it can blow back on your face. Any more?
Well, really, Stuart, just to say thanks for doing the presentation, and just to say that it sounds awful when you go through all the possible diseases of bees, but in 20 odd years of keeping bees, the only thing that I've ever suffered from has been a chalk brood, which has never been a huge problem. And I think that's true for most of us. So just to end up on a slightly upbeat note.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, I unfortunately suffered from chronic bee paralysis virus last year, but that's bizarre. It just arrives out of nowhere. Nobody else in the area seemed to have it. It was just 2 of my colonies last year and 1 the year before. But I've taken extreme measures to get rid of it now. There was petrol involved, which is very sad, but I had to do it. And hopefully it's now completely gone.
How many miles to the gallon did you get?
Out of a bee, it's not very far.
11 frames.
Per gallon.
11 frames to the gallon. Well, no, that's a bit extravagant. I've had the same problem, Stuart, as you with chronic bee paralysis virus. I lost 1 colony this year in a week, from being great to gone, and I had a similar problem 3 years ago. So it's not that desperate, really, is it? You know.
No.
Once that, I mean, I destroyed everything, all the frames and everything that was in that colony, and scorched it all out, bleached it, and hopefully that's the end of that.
Well, as I say,
it happens.
Yeah, it does. I mean, things and people get diseases. It's
and the sad thing with that is it's big, strong colonies, isn't it? Which is always disappointing, but it's just one of those things. I'm sure farmers have poorly cows and poorly sheep.
Yeah. All right. Any more?
Hello, Stuart. Steve here.
Hello, Steve.
Had an email from Bee Equipment today, pushing for sales of bees again, and he's letting everyone know that they are coming in from Northern Ireland, from Puglia, and they are being checked by a vet. I wondered if he's got round to the problems he had before.
Well, he supposedly paid a £2,000 deposit, or was it £20,000 on these bees?
It's 29. I think there's a 21% discount on the deposit.
Right.
I'll get it up on the phone if I can find it. No, I just wondered if he got around this business of them coming in.
It was the National Bee Unit, well, basically the government said that they will be clamping down on it, because the imports are allowed from Northern Ireland, provided they are products originating from Northern Ireland. using the back
Yeah.
from other parts of Europe, they will clamp down on. That was the last I heard.
Yeah, what he's saying here is our bees have been specifically chosen for their typical buckfast qualities, calmness on the frame, blah, blah, blah. Perfect for beekeepers. Supplied from an associated company in Northern Ireland. They are received into Northern Ireland from Italy, and after the bees have been health checked by a government appointed vet, they are reboxed into hives, fed and allowed to fly. 21% off.
A vet? Did you say a vet?
Sorry?
Were they being looked at by a vet, did you say?
Yes, a government appointed vet apparently, before they are being allowed to carry on.
All sounds a bit strange.
I would have to say that very.
Gone mute, Eric.
Lost you, Eric.
I would simply say that very few vets know much about bees, and I would strongly recommend that people not to import bees, because the probability is you may import various diseases of bees, and attempting to bring stuff in through the back door, even though you probably recognize by my accent I'm from Northern Ireland, I wouldn't recommend it.
I wasn't going to say anything.
Coming from Italy, I think I'd be worried about a small hive beetle. I mean, you don't know where in Italy they've hailed from, do you?
Yeah, Puglia.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
Catch them with a barge pole.
Yeah. Let's put it this way: he started a petition to have the the ban overturned, and he needs 100,000 people to sign that petition. When I looked yesterday, he had 875 signatures in about 3 weeks. So I don't think he's going to get one with that one.
There's another question on the chat from Mary Cuss.
Yeah, got it.
About using the petrol.
No, a hive is, sorry, the question is, silly question. There are no silly questions, Mary. Don't worry, none whatsoever. I've had some that could be considered silly in the past. This isn't one of them. If you sadly had to use petrol in your hive to destroy your colony, is your hive then no longer usable? No, it'll be fine. I wouldn't do it immediately, but if you left it, get the bees and the frames out, and then put the boxes somewhere in a shed to air. I say in a shed so that bees can't get to it. Put it somewhere to air, somewhere like a greenhouse or something like that that's warm, so the vapors will evaporate off. And then after about a week, I would gingerly use a heat gun on it just to be sure that you've got rid of all the fumes before using a blowtorch. And then, but don't talk to me about wooden fires in sheds, because I'm not the best person to speak to on that subject. Let's put it this way: my shed that was destroyed by fire last summer is being rebuilt starting Monday week.
Well done. Can I just remind you about petrol fumes in the greenhouse? Not if you've got any plants in it.
Yeah. Right. Make that a shed.
And also, Stuart, can I just say, don't keep the wax. Don't try and cut the wax out of the frames before, don't. Can you hear me?
No. Sorry, you're breaking up a bit, Lionel, but I know what you're going to say. Don't try and be a cheapskate and keep the frames and the wax. It's not worth it. That's where the disease will be. I would just burn the frames and the wax. Have a bonfire or use it for kindling in the winter. Makes excellent kindling. Burn your problem, and just scorch the boxes out. Don't ever use second-hand frames or buy second-hand frames from anybody, or second-hand wax, used wax. Is that okay, Lionel? Sorry, I can see you, but
Yeah, that was it. Yeah. Thank you.
we're nearly there. Yeah, I think we're done, aren't we? It's nearly 1 o'clock, so I've got a date with the corpse.
Can I just
Oh,
ask?
Yeah, sure.
Hello.
Hi.
Can I just ask? A grumpy, quite a large, strong colony, but of grumpy bees with an older queen. Any suggestions?
Yeah. Do you want to do that one, Joe? You're muted.
Okay, yeah, go.
Sorry, is it, Terry, that you've bought this hive, you've purchased
Colony.
this hive, a colony? Is
No,
that what you're saying?
No, it's so the reason I'm doing this is because a friend of mine has bees already, and she's asked me to be her bee buddy. So we were just talking today, and she was explaining about the hives that she's got, and she's got two. One's a really strong colony, but they're quite grumpy, and there's an old queen in it. So I was just curious as to where we might go with that this year.
So I can speak.
You can speak. Still not muted.
Right, sorry, Terry. I thought I was muted, but I'm not. The thing is, it's nice that you've got a bee buddy, and as a long-term project and a long-term principle, obviously grumpy bees aren't fun to work with, and if one can actually, you know, correct that position, it may well be if you've got one hive which is you know, good-tempered and a pleasure to be with, and the other one is rather grumpy, that you would be able to make up a nucleus, a small colony from the good-natured colony. And obviously, if the other colony has an older queen, it may well be that she might be superseded, or that there will be an attempt at swarming this summer, and there are various procedures, you know, which your friend will know about, which you can make use of this natural behavior and turn it to your own advantage. So you will be able to, you know, actually get rid of that queen. I mean, in absolute extremis, if say you were in the middle of summer when there were plenty of drones about, and, you know, you had a colony which was really, really offensively aggressive, that what you can do, and this is an extreme measure, is actually, you know, go in there and kill the queen, and then they're forced to replace her. But if, you know, they're upsetting the neighbors, they're stinging the children, you know, you can on occasion be, you know, forced to do something extreme. I mean, unless they're absolutely totally vile, and you've got, you know, neighbors screaming at you that they're going to sue you and you do this, then perhaps you might have to destroy the colony, or perhaps you can move it to an out apiary, you know, 3 miles away, while you do whatever it is you're going to do. But as the long-term objective, I think, would be to try and make use of the good characteristics of the pleasant colony and breed from that, and, you know, replace get rid of the aggressive characteristic in the other hive.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so. She did last year. She did split the two hives. They're in two different fields, so she split the two hives so that they were kind of away from each other. Because I think the grumpy hive was sort of trying to take over the nice hive, as well as, you know, kind of like domineering it. So she split two hives so that they were further apart. But yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, that's helpful.
Okay. You can always come back to me, you know, in the spring, and if you want to talk about it more, you know.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So that was another reason for ordering my bee suit, because I know that, you know, she'll be up ready and running in the not too distant future with the weather getting better.
Yeah, you don't want to test your sprinting capacity too soon, do you?
Yeah, that's it. So yeah,
it's a very nice lady in Cheddar called Bridget Knutson, who is an extremely experienced beekeeper. I'll drop her in it. If you've got any problems, I will get in touch with Bridget. because the bees are in Cheddar anyway, aren't they, Terry? Yeah, she lives in Widgetts Road.
Okay, so she's just around the corner from me. Yeah.
Yeah, Bridget's lovely. Absolutely lovely.
Very experienced, isn't she?
Oh yeah, she's
Okay.
a master beekeeper. So. Yeah,
All right.
nice lady.
I'll hunt her out and see if she'll let me go and have a look.
0194742 No, I never said that.
Okay, thank you.
6 Widget Road.
Just say thank you. Very good evening. Thank you.
Okay, right. I'm going to call a halt. Those who are still here, there are very few, but I will send all the notes out again in the morning and make sure I broke the emailing list into 2. I think maybe I should have broken it into smaller groups to send them out. So I'll do that in the morning. Apologies if you've had it all before, but it's the only way of ensuring that everybody gets the notes. Okay, and we'll talk about bee suits and colonies of bees for sale and all that sort of thing next week. And yeah, and Joe will be running that one. Okay, thanks everybody. See you next week.